I never expected to be back in that house, not after the way they treated me the last time. But there I was standing in front of the Ashbourne estate, suitcase in hand, heart thudding like a warning bell in my chest. They thought they erased me. They thought I wouldn't show. They forgot I always listen in silence and remember everything. The gates creaked open slowly, as if even the steel could sense the tension waiting inside. I walked up the driveway alone, my boots crunching against the gravel path I knew by heart. That house, it held memories and ghosts. The last time I stood here, I was just the mistake. The illegitimate child of Charles Ashbourne, a reminder of his one foolish night with a woman the family called the Help. But to my grandfather, James Ashbourne, I was never a stain. I was the granddaughter who read to him when his hands shook, who brought him tea before the nurses came, who knew the difference between his sighs of pain and his sighs of regret. So when he died last week, quietly, with nothing but my name on his lips, I knew deep in my gut that this was far from over. Inside, the vultures had gathered. My Aunt Ruth sat at the head of the long mahogany table like she already owned the place, her pearl necklace strained against her neck. A reminder she liked things tight and in control. Beside her was Uncle Gregory, pretending to mourn while sneaking glances at the wine cellar inventory sheet like it was the Holy Grail. Cousin Blake scrolled on his phone with all the grace of a bored frat boy. And then there was my mother, not sitting with me. Not looking at me, just fixing her lipstick in a compact mirror like this was some gala. Not her father's will reading. They didn't save me a seat, so I took one at the far end of the table, silently, like I always do. Ruth's voice pierced the room before the lawyer even arrived. Well, at least she showed up. I suppose even the forgotten want to watch us collect what's rightfully ours. She said it loud enough for me to hear intentionally, but I didn't bite. I didn't even blink. My silence made her nervous. 5 minutes later, the lawyer walked in. Mr. Hemsley, gray suit, gray hair, black leather briefcase. He looked like he'd aged 10 years since the last time I saw him. But his eyes, sharp as glass, met mine the second he stepped in. He nodded. Just once. It wasn't warm. It was confirmation. He knew something they didn't. Thank you all for being here, he began, adjusting his tie as he sat. Before we proceed, I need to state clearly the document I'm about to read was signed, witnessed, and legally registered 3 weeks prior to Mr. Ashbourne's passing. Any alternate versions circulating are invalid. That line landed like a slap across the room. Ruth straightened. Alternate versions. There's only one version of the will. He signed it last year. Mr. Hemsley opened his briefcase and pulled out a sealed gray envelope. He didn't look at her. Instead, he looked at me again. No, Mrs. Langley, he said coolly. There is a final version, and it supersedes the one you're referring to. I could hear Blake curse under his breath. This was the moment the air changed. They'd assumed, of course, that my name wasn't in it. Last Christmas, when I didn't come home, Ruth told everyone I'd burned every bridge. When I refused to play polite during Grandpa's 85th birthday and called out Gregory's shady business deals, they said I was jealous. When I stopped coming to brunches, they called me ungrateful. What they didn't know was that Grandpa had invited me back, quietly, 3 weeks before he died. He couldn't speak much anymore, but he'd written my name on a napkin, just my name, and handed it to me with a key, a small brass key with an A engraved on the handle. I hadn't known what it meant back then, but I kept it in my pocket, like an anchor. Something told me that key still had a door left to open. I barely noticed my mother staring at me across the table. She hadn't said a word since I walked in, hadn't even acknowledged me, but her fingers kept fidgeting with the hem of her sleeve twisting, pulling, unraveling. A sign I hadn't seen since I was 10. She was nervous. She should be. The room was so quiet I could hear the clock ticking above the fireplace, tick, 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 until the lawyer's voice cut through the silence like a blade. The following individuals have been removed from any claim to Mr. Ashbourne's estate: Ruth Langley, Gregory Ashbourne, Daniel Ashbourne, and Marissa Day. My mother's head snapped up. What she whispered. Mr. Hemsley didn't stop. Furthermore, Mr. Ashbourne has appointed full control of all properties, assets, and company shares to... I didn't breathe. Miss Alara Quinn. Silence. Dead, raw, electrified silence. Then chaos. What kind of joke is this? Ruth barked. Are you out of your mind? Gregory shot up, knocking over his chair. Blake was already pacing, shouting something about lawyers and forged documents. But I didn't say a word. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. I just reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the brass key. Let it rest on the polished wood table. Let them see it. Let them remember who gave it to me. I looked at the lawyer one last time. He gave a single nod. The room spun in chaos. But inside me, there was only one thing: stillness. Because the truth was simple. They tried to erase me. But my grandfather, he made sure I'd be the first name they remembered. I was 14 when I learned silence had more power than screaming. It was a rainy afternoon, the kind where the sky hangs low like it's mourning something it hasn't lost yet. I stood behind the staircase, hidden, heart racing, breath shallow, watching my mother close the study door behind her like she was sealing away a secret. I shouldn't have heard what I heard that day, but I did. And I never forgot. James is out of his mind, my mother hissed. He wants to give her the Ashbourne shares. That was Ruth's voice, clipped, entitled, cold as a marble countertop. She's not even legitimate, my mother snapped. You want that girl's name on a boardroom plaque? She's a threat, Gregory added, voice low like a conspirator. And threats get neutralized. That word, neutralized. I was 14, but I wasn't stupid. I realized that day that my mother wasn't afraid of me failing. She was afraid of me becoming more than her. Years passed, and that same fear grew claws. I went to college on a merit scholarship, no help from the Ashbourne Trust. They said it was reserved for rightful heirs. I worked 3 jobs, lived in a studio apartment where the heater coughed more than it worked, and still managed to graduate top of my class. But no one clapped at my graduation. No one from the family even showed up. They said I distanced myself. What they really meant was I stopped playing the part of the forgotten girl. Fast forward to 3 weeks before Grandpa died. He called me. No pretense. No soft intro. Alara. He rasped. Come see me. Now. No one else. I dropped everything. I don't even remember what I was wearing. I just remember the way his hand trembled as he handed me that brass key. The way his eyes, clouded with pain, still burned with clarity. He didn't say much. Just this, they'll try to erase you, so I left you the ink. I didn't know what he meant, not fully. But I held that key like a secret. And when he passed 5 days later, the house went dark, and so did every phone call from the family. They didn't tell me about the memorial. They didn't put my name in the obituary. They posted pictures laughing, drinking wine and black lace, and I wasn't even tagged, but I got a text from a number I didn't recognize. You weren't supposed to be cut out. Come to the reading and sit. Don't speak. The message disappeared 30 seconds later. The night before the will reading, I drove past the Ashbourne vineyard. I hadn't seen it in years, but nothing had changed. The soil still smelled like late summer and crushed grapes. And the house still loomed like it knew what it had done. I parked far away, walked the old footpath barefoot, let my skin feel every root, every stone, let memory bite. Then I saw it. A flicker of light in the conservatory. I wasn't alone. I crept closer, keeping to the shadows. My heart pounded like a drum solo, but my steps were silent. Inside the conservatory stood Ruth, phone in hand, back turned. Tell the lawyer we'll sue if she gets a cent, she spat. I don't care what James wanted, he was delusional. She's a charity case, not family. Silence on the other end. Then her voice dropped. We forged the initial draft. Don't look shocked. We had no choice. James wanted to hand over the board seat to Alara. Do you understand what that would have meant? She's not a Langley, not an Ashbourne. She's a threat. My stomach clenched, not from shock, but from confirmation. I had always known. The next voice chilled me more. She was never supposed to be born, my mother said, stepping out from the shadows behind Ruth. She ruined everything. He would have left it all to me if she hadn't existed. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter the glass wall between us and yell, then why did you keep me? But I didn't. I stayed in the shadows. Because that's what survivors do. I left without being seen, drove to the motel on 7th Street, hands trembling so badly I could barely hold the key. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the floor, staring at the little brass A, and I remembered every moment I'd ever been told I didn't belong, every Christmas card I never received, every family photo where I was cropped out, every time someone whispered the bastard child when I entered the room. But that night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to fight them for a seat at the table. I was going to wait until the table was already mine. I rehearsed every breath, every glance, every silence, because I knew when the lawyer read that will, they would try to burn me with their stares, their rage, their lies. But I had fire of my own, and unlike them, I didn't need to scream to be heard. The next morning, I wore the same black dress I'd worn to my college graduation. It didn't matter that it was out of season. It mattered that no one had clapped for me in it. But this time, they'd stand or kneel. The rest you already know. The looks, the disbelief, the name my name read first. But before that twist, there was the betrayal. The quiet, calculated, generational betrayal. The kind that isn't screamed across dinner tables, but whispered behind closed doors with crystal glasses and forged papers. The kind that doesn't just wound you, it rewrites your entire story until you decide to take the pen back. And I had, with one key, one text, one seat at a table I was never meant to sit at. They thought they won, but all they really did was teach me how to wait. They didn't speak to me after the will was read. Not a single word. Ruth stormed out first, her heels hitting the marble like war drums. Gregory followed, muttering about contesting the will. Blake called his lawyer before he was even out the door. But I just sat there, still, composed. It was the most power I had ever felt. Mr. Hemsley approached me once the room emptied, placing the will folder gently on the table like it was something sacred. "You'll want to review this in private," he said quietly. "There are letters inside. Letters I asked, barely above a whisper." He gave a small nod. "From your grandfather. And instructions. You're the executor now. Everything flows through you." I blinked. The words didn't land at first. Executor. Me, I wasn't just the heir. I was the anchor. I didn't go home. Not to my cramped apartment. Not to the motel off 7th Street. I went back to the estate. The staff was gone, dismissed the morning of the will reading. The halls echoed with memory, empty and vast. I walked past portraits of men who built empires and women who married into legacy. Their eyes followed me, but none of them looked like me, except the one at the very end of the West Wing. A painting of James Ashbourne, holding a book in one hand, a glass of scotch in the other, the only one who saw me. I unlocked the study with the brass key. The door creaked open like it hadn't been used in decades, even though I knew it had every day, when he was alive. His chair was still facing the fireplace. A glass still sat on the side table, half full, untouched. It felt like I was walking into a moment, frozen in grief. On the desk, a box, mahogany, with my name carved into the top, Alara. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside 3 things. 1, a letter, folded neatly. 2, 3, a USB drive. 4, 5, a faded photograph me, age 6, asleep on his chest. Both of us under the orchard tree. 6. I picked up the letter first. "My girl, if you're reading this, then you already know they tried to stop you. They always would. They hate what they can't control. But I saw you long before they did. You never asked me for anything. Not money, not power, just time. And I gave you what I had. Now I'm giving you what they always feared your place. Use the USB only if they fight. You'll know when. And one more thing. The land behind the vineyard, dig where the rosebush bends. You'll find something that explains everything. They tried to erase you, Alara. But I built this legacy for you. Take it, and never lower your voice again. James." I read the letter 3 times, once with awe, once with anger, once with tears. Then I turned to the USB. I didn't play it. Not yet. Not until I knew how far they'd go. Instead, I walked out of the study, down the creaking staircase, and into the Ashbourne War Room, the office where every family deal had been negotiated since 1896. There, I found the papers. Real ones, unaltered, signed in ink, stock transfers, real estate deeds, corporate proxies, all in my name. I wasn't just the heir to some sentimental vineyard. I was now the majority shareholder of Ashbourne Holdings, the same company Gregory tried to bankrupt twice, the same firm Blake had been siphoning from to fund his crypto empire, and it was all mine. For 3 days, I stayed silent. No social media posts, no press releases, not even a text to my friends. Let them whisper, let them assume it was a clerical error, let them hope I was in over my head. Because while they panicked, I was preparing. I started with the law, called in Eleanor Voss, Grandpa's old estate attorney, who had been sidelined after Ruth accused her of emotional manipulation. Eleanor answered on the second ring. I knew he'd do it. She said no one believed me, but I knew. We met at the vineyard 2 hours later. She brought binders, she brought evidence, she brought fire. Together, we mapped out the web, forged documents, misused trust funds, side accounts in the Caymans, Gregory's off-book loans to private developers, Ruth's backdoor deal to sell the Westfields for a silent profit. I didn't need revenge. I just needed clarity and leverage. I sent Blake a simple email. Effective immediately, your access to Ashbourne Financials is suspended pending audit. E.Q. He replied with 3 laughing emojis and the words, nice bluff. Bastard Barbie. I didn't answer. I just blind copied our legal counsel on the email. Ruth was next, a formal letter, served through certified mail. As per Article 12, Clause 4b of James Ashbourne's directive, all board members with known conflicts of interest shall be removed following an internal review. Your removal is scheduled for Friday, 10 a.m. 10 minutes after she received it, I got a call. I didn't pick up. Then came a text. We need to talk. This has gone far enough. To which I replied, it hasn't even started. That night, I sat in the conservatory alone, the same place I had once overheard their betrayal. But this time, it was mine. I played the USB. Grandpa's voice filled the room. Soft, measured, ironclad. If you're watching this, it means they challenged you. Let them. You hold more than just the estate. You hold truth. And truth is an avalanche. I didn't sleep. Instead, I walked to the edge of the vineyard, flashlight in hand, and found the rose bush. It bent at the base, just like he said. I dug. My fingers hit wood. A second box. Inside documents. A signed confession. From Marissa Day, my mother. A written statement admitting she colluded with Ruth to suppress Grandpa's final draft of the will, with a date, a signature, and a notary stamp. It wasn't just inheritance now, it was fraud, it was legal war, and I had every piece I needed. But I didn't scream, I didn't post, I didn't slam doors or call press conferences. No, I drafted one final email to the Ashbourne board, to the media, to the estate's legal team. Subject line, a correction of legacy. The courtroom didn't look like a battlefield. It looked like any other room, white walls, oak benches, and that faint scent of paper and polish. But to me, it was the arena where years of betrayal, silence, and injustice would finally unfold. I didn't dress for war. I wore a black suit, clean lines, sharp shoulders, no jewelry, no makeup, because I wasn't here to sparkle. I was here to end things. They filed in one by one, like characters in a play they thought they were still directing. Ruth, in an overdone fur coat like she was attending a winter gala. Gregory, chewing gum like a teenager, trying to project nonchalance. Blake, hungover or high or both. And Marissa, my mother, her eyes didn't even meet mine. That was fine. I didn't need their recognition anymore. What I needed was their reaction when everything came crashing down. Judge Hawthorne entered with her usual steel-cold expression. I'd researched her thoroughly, former federal prosecutor, known for her zero tolerance for estate manipulation and her brutal cross-examinations. Perfect. She looked over the documents, then at me. Ms. Quinn, she said, you've submitted a petition to uphold the final will of Mr. James Ashbourne and simultaneously filed charges of fraud and document suppression against Ruth Langley, Gregory Ashbourne, and Marissa Day. Are you prepared to proceed? I am, Your Honor. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to rise. It cut, Ruth stood to object. Of course she did. This is absurd, she scoffed. We're talking about a will changed without our knowledge. Objection, Your Honor, my attorney cut in. The opposing party was not entitled to knowledge of private revisions unless legally notified, which they were not, by choice of the decedent. The judge nodded. Sit down, Mrs. Langley. You'll have your turn. I almost smiled. Almost. What followed was quiet chaos. First, we submitted the updated will time-stamped, notarized, legally filed. Then, Eleanor took the stand. She was a force of composure. Mr. Ashbourne was of sound mind when he revised the will, she said clearly. He deliberately excluded the former beneficiaries due to a pattern of financial misconduct. She laid it all out, the secret accounts, the fake valuations, the internal memos, each page like a blade to the throat. Then came the footage. I nodded once. The tech assistant wheeled in a screen. Judge Hawthorne glanced at me. What am I about to see? I answered simply, the truth, Your Honor, from the source. And then I pressed play. There he was, Grandpa, on screen, sitting in that same leather chair by the fireplace, wearing his navy cardigan, fingers clasped in front of him like he was speaking to the board of directors one last time. If you're watching this, then they tried to erase her, he said. And to those of you in this room right now, yes. I mean, you consider this my final meeting. Ruth paled. Gregory froze mid-breath. My mother finally looked at me. Elara is not a charity case, Grandpa continued. She is my granddaughter. She is the only one who stayed. When the rest of you were too busy calculating your shares, she was holding my hand. I saw what you tried to do. I let you show your colors. And I changed the will the moment she left the room, because I knew what you would try. So this is me telling the court, and the world I leave everything to her, because she never asked for a damn thing, and she deserves all of it. When the video ended, no one spoke. The judge looked at me, then at them. She didn't ask if the video was real. She didn't ask if the signature was forged. She said, Ms. Quinn, please continue. And I did. Next, we introduced the signed confession. Marissa's. The one I dug up under the rosebush. Eleanor handed it to the clerk. You could hear the rustling of paper like a scream in the silence. Ruth finally broke. She forged that, she said. Standing up, voice cracking. She's lying. She's always lied. Objection, my attorney snapped. The document contains a verified notary stamp and signature match, on file with the state registry. The judge didn't even blink. Sit down, Mrs. Langley, or I will hold you in contempt. Gregory stood next. This isn't fair, she manipulated an old man. And that's when I did the one thing I'd waited to do for years. I stood, calmly, walked to the witness podium, faced them all, and said quietly, I didn't take anything. I was given what you tried to bury. And now, I'm simply bringing it back into the light. The court recessed for deliberation. I stepped outside into the hallway. It was cold, quiet, no cameras, no interviews, just me. For the first time, standing in the very legacy they said I didn't deserve. And I thought back to every time I'd heard the phrase, you'll never be one of us. They were right. I wasn't. I was something else entirely. I was the one they couldn't break, the one they couldn't predict, the one who waited and struck without raising her voice. 30 minutes later, the judge called us back in. Her gavel hit once. This court recognizes the final will of James Ashbourne as legally binding. All former beneficiaries are hereby removed. The estate, holdings, and related assets shall transfer fully to Elara Quinn. She paused, then looked each of them in the eye. Furthermore, due to overwhelming evidence of fraud and collusion, a criminal investigation will proceed against the parties involved. Silence, thick, suffocating, until Ruth gasped. Gregory collapsed into the chair, and my mother just wept. But I didn't move. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. Because the point wasn't to win. The point was to reclaim my name. The courtroom emptied. I walked out with the letter in one pocket, the key in the other. Outside, the sun had started to break through the clouds. A weak light, but enough. I didn't need applause. I didn't need recognition. Just the sound of my heels on the marble floor, the rhythm of legacy rewriting itself beneath my feet. They thought it ended in that courtroom. The gavel, the verdict, the fallout. But stories like mine never end with noise. They end with silence. And what comes after? It took 2 weeks to finalize the transfer of assets. 2 weeks of emails, meetings, signatures, frozen accounts, unfrozen truths. 2 weeks where Ruth called me 27 times. I didn't pick up once. Gregory tried to negotiate. He offered to mentor me in business. I forwarded his message to legal with a single line, no contact. Blake never reached out. But a video of him crying on a podcast surfaced. I lost everything to a girl who didn't even grow up with us. He said, "She's not even a real Ashbourne." And for the first time in my life, I didn't flinch at that phrase. Because now, I understood. I was never meant to be one of them. I was meant to outlive them. The estate felt colder when I returned. Not haunted, just stripped. Portraits had been taken down, furniture covered, the piano untouched. I didn't unpack. Instead, I walked room to room, barefoot, letting the floors creak beneath me like they were exhaling. And then I reached the orchard, the place where that old photo was taking me asleep on Grandpa's chest. The tree was still there, bigger now, stronger, like me. I sat under it for hours, no guards, no witnesses, no noise, just me, and the echoes. That's when I opened the second envelope he'd left, the one labeled for when you're ready to build. Inside was a blueprint, not of a building, but of an idea, a foundation for the Quinn Initiative, a nonprofit designed to offer estate literacy, legal aid, and empowerment to women like me, women left out of the picture, out of the will, out of the narrative. It wasn't just a gesture. It was a plan, and it would carry my name, not Ashbourne, not Day, Quinn. In the months that followed, I rebuilt the estate. But not as a family manor. I turned the West Wing into legal offices, the vineyard into an education center, the ballroom into a scholarship fund headquarters, and the master bedroom I left it untouched. That was James Ashbourne's room. It would always be his. But on the door, I added a plaque. He planted the seed, she grew the forest. The press caught on, eventually. They called it a quiet revolution. Heiress turns estate into empire of empowerment. Forgotten granddaughter becomes powerhouse philanthropist. Quinn. Over Ashbourne, the new legacy. But I didn't do interviews, didn't post statements, didn't pose for magazine spreads, because this was never about revenge. It was about reclamation. I didn't want their apology. I wanted their silence. And I got it. One morning, 6 months later, I received a letter. No return address. Inside, just one line. You made something beautiful from something rotten. I recognized the handwriting. My mother. She didn't ask for forgiveness, didn't try to justify. And that, strangely, was enough. Because closure doesn't always arrive with answers. Sometimes, it arrives with a period. And after a lifetime of commas, of ellipses, of half-spoken grief, I finally had one. I stood before the board of Ashbourne Holdings at our next annual meeting. All new members, all women, all people who'd once been overlooked. I took the same seat Gregory once claimed as his throne. But I didn't speak about profits. I spoke about presence. This company used to build walls to keep people like me out. I said, now we build doors. The room stood in applause, but I didn't stand with them. I stayed seated, rooted, because my legacy wasn't loud. It was grounded. Planted, growing. I visit the vineyard every weekend, not to work, not to watch, just to be. Sometimes I sit under the tree with that old photo in my hand. I look at the girl I was, the one who was told she'd never be seen. And I whisper, you were always enough. They just couldn't bear to see it. The world forgot me, but I never forgot myself. And in the end, that was all the power I ever needed.